As Hollie's dad, I had to identify her body. And the coroner said to me, you need to brace yourself because Hollie's been badly cut about the face and arms where she tried to defend herself. And I can't ask you to imagine what I was thinking at that stage. What am I going to see? How bad is this going to be? My young daughter is led on that slab. What am I going to see? But as Hollie's next of kin, I had to do that. And we saw Hollie lying there under a white sheet. That signing along that dotted line was again one of the hardest things that I had to do as a father. I always remember when I first became a father and the joy was immense, and I still have that picture in my mind with both girls. And I remember buying them a teddy each when they were born, and we still have those teddies today. Hollie and Chloe, as sisters, had a very, very good relationship. They were always very, very close. They were a bit like chalk and cheese. They wanted different things and did different things. She was a great football supporter, and she supported Manchester United, which is my team. And I have one great memory of Hollie when I managed to take her to Old Trafford to watch a game, and we had a great time as father and daughter. My hopes for Hollie were that she would just enjoy life. She would have a happy, long and successful life. When she did her school work experience, she did it in a hair salon, so I think that gave her a bit of the bug. She had beautiful hair and she could do what she wanted with it, and she could experiment, she could be creative. When Hollie qualified as a level 3 hairdresser, she came to me one day and said, Dad, I do have the travelling bug, and I want to travel. And I said, okay, great idea to see the world and experience different cultures, but we've got to be a little bit careful of the safety element. So we talked about it, and we came up with the view that perhaps going on a cruise ship where she could combine her travelling and her hairdressing would be a great option. So she applied to a company called Steiner. We took her to Exeter, she had the interview, she passed. And while she was waiting to go to London to train, she was working in a club called Zest in Gloucester. It was there that she met Maslin. He came in and he was a regular, and she told us about this. And she said, Dad, do you mind if I bring someone home? I said, no, of course, it's your home, Hollie. You bring home whoever you want to. And when she walked in the door with Maslin, my wife said, oh no, not him, which I thought was a bit strange, but my wife had worked at the local school and she knew him from being not of good character at the school. So we were a little bit concerned, but give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And after a couple of weeks, he built a relationship with her, and he was now going to dominate the next 12 months of her life. In fact, more than dominate, he was going to brutally end it. Hollie and Maslin were together only 3 or 4 weeks before Hollie went to London to train with Steiner. And it was very much, I would say, a relationship that it's like being a friendship. But when we took her up to London on the Sunday evening, we found out that on the Monday, Maslin had travelled to London as well to be with her. He didn't have a job, he didn't have anywhere to stay, but he was infatuated with Hollie, and that's why he followed her to London. After 5 weeks training with Steiner in London, she got the call to go on a cruise ship. She was only 19, but she was allocated to the celebration ship, a part of the Carnival line in the Bahamas. She gave us the call. We went up to Watford to pick her up and take her to Heathrow so that she could board a flight to Miami. It was a bit strange because when we got to Watford, in a car park, we were loading the car, suddenly Maslin turned up, and we thought it was a bit strange. But obviously Hollie said, oh, he's only here just to say goodbye to me, so we didn't think any more of it. So we took her to Heathrow, she got on a flight to Miami, and there she was. We thought 9-month contract, happily on the ship, doing the job that she wanted to do. But within a week, she telephoned us and said, Dad, I want to come home. You know, can you arrange flights to get me home? You know, we thought that was really strange because Hollie was the type of individual who was very strong, and when she set her mind on something, she would follow it through. So we could not understand why, you know, having thought about this for a period of months, given her job up, did all the training, suddenly after a week, she wanted to come home. It just didn't make sense to us. But obviously, first port of call, we wanted to get Hollie back because that's what she wanted. So we arranged the flights. My wife went to the airport to pick her up a week later, and we brought her back to Gloucester. Now, when she got back to Gloucester, she was happy-go-lucky. You know, she didn't say much. She just said, you know, it didn't suit her. You know, whether that was the right reason now, but you know, we didn't have any need to question her. It was her decision. But what she did say was that she loved that London lifestyle, that fast-paced passion she had for fashion, and she wanted to go back to London to train. So, you know, she quickly got a job in Edgware as a stylist in the April 2013. And then we found out that Maslin had followed her again. To be honest, we didn't think a lot of it. You know, we didn't know anything about coercive control. We didn't know anything about stalking or domestic abuse. You know, it never entered our mind. We'd never come across it before. So for us, it was just someone that was a little bit infatuated with Hollie and wanted to be with her. But we went to London on a couple of occasions and took Hollie out to dinner. And one thing sticks in my mind is that when she came out with us, Maslin wasn't around, but she had a number of calls from him, and we could hear him in the background saying, "Don't let them take you back." It didn't really register with us at that time or mean anything, but now looking back on it, it was something that he was afraid that she would come back with us and he would lose that ability and that power to isolate her on her own in London, which is one of the tactics that abusers use. And again, at that stage, we didn't know that. But you know, lots of these little subtleties we can see now, looking back on that relationship, particularly when she was in London, that at the time didn't register with us. And in May, she came back to Gloucester for the weekend because it was my wife's birthday. Maslin came back with her. We'd booked a table at a local restaurant, and because he was with Hollie, we invited him as well. So we were all there, sat at the restaurant. He turned up an hour late, and he'd been drinking. He was drunk. What we then saw was, I believe, the true character of Maslin. He was manipulative, he was abusive, not only to Hollie, but to the other people in the restaurant, to the owners. He was clicking his fingers. It was the way he spoke to her and what he said. You know, it was degrading. It was treating her like a piece of dirt. It was treating her like a slave. And I didn't like that. You know, this is my daughter you're talking to. Chloe's partner had to take him outside to tell him to stop. And I said to her, you know, if you want me to get involved, please let me know. Hollie said, no, it's fine, Dad, not a problem, I can handle it. I was quite happy to let Hollie deal with it because she was that strong character. After that, on the Sunday, you know, we were a bit concerned that Hollie was going back to London with him because we saw a different person. You know, Maslin, some of his family and Hollie went to the Notting Hill Carnival. And it was there that she got separated from him slightly, and she was with his young cousin, and she took his young cousin to toilet. And because she did that, and Maslin couldn't find her, he got really angry. And what we now know is he floored her, and this is what she said to Chloe. That evening she called Chloe and told Chloe about it, and the following morning she called me and said, "Dad, can you come and pick me up? I want to come back to Gloucester." And I didn't really ask the reason why. She said she was homesick. So, of course, as a parent, I dropped everything, jumped in the car, went to London, packed all her things, and brought her back to Gloucester. What we found out then, subsequently, on the following day, is that Maslin also returned to Gloucester on the same day, i.e., he was following Hollie. You know, she got a good job in a local salon, Fringe Benefits, as a stylist. She also got a job in the local pub, and everything seemed to be okay. You know, Maslin was around, but they didn't see each other that often, but as time progressed, he became more and more in the picture. Often, Hollie would have to turn her phone off at night because she was getting so many calls and texts from Maslin. And when she put it back on in the morning, we could hear it go ping, 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 and it carried on for ages. So he must have sent multiple texts and tried to phone her on multiple occasions, trying to get hold of her. But he knew she was at home, and Hollie started to say things like, I don't want to be with him anymore, I want to get rid of him. And this was sort of the October, November of 2013. I now know the reason why she got the job in the evening was so that Maslin couldn't be with her. Although he turned up at the pub, the landlord said he was barred and didn't want him to be in the pub because that's what Hollie wanted. So we can infer from that Hollie was trying to get rid of him, but he wasn't taking that no for an answer. And this carried on over the Christmas period into January, and we became increasingly concerned about that relationship. He would turn up a couple of nights at our house. He wasn't very nice, and at one stage I had to tell Hollie, I don't want him around here anymore. You tell him to stay away. And she started to say that, Dad, I really want to get rid of this guy. So, we said to her, why don't you take him to a place where you're in the public eye and you can give him that message and give him it very firm that it's over, you don't want to be with him anymore. So she said, that's fine, I can do that. My wife and I were out, we had a meal, we got home, Hollie came straight home, went straight to bed, and she got up in the morning on the Saturday and went to work, as she always did on a Saturday because she was a hairdresser. That evening we picked her up and she was a changed person, and we said, what's wrong? And then she told us about the night before, about what had happened. She tried to get rid of him, she tried to give him that message that it was over, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He threw a drink in her face. She went to her car, he followed her, jumped in, put a hand on the handbrake, wouldn't let her go, and stole her credit card from inside her bag in the footwell. He then went across to the local cash point and drew a lot of her money. He obviously knew her PIN because he lived with her. So she told us about this, and we said, right, now you've got to call the police because this is getting out of hand. And she said, yes, I will. So we were with her and we gave her that support. She called the police, we listened to what she said, and some of the things we heard, we just could not believe. Things like, he said that if I break up with him, he'd throw acid in my face to spoil my looks and my career as a hairdresser. If I break up with him, his family will get me. And this was all a big surprise to us, and we couldn't believe what we were hearing. And when the police come round that evening, again, what she said to the two policemen, again, took us back in terms of how he treated her and what he was saying to her and what he would do to her. She was in our house, the police went away, and they said they would come back on the Sunday to take a statement. Some of the things that we were hearing when Hollie was talking to the police, just didn't have a clue as to what was happening in that relationship, and that really did rock us, and when she discussed with the police on the Sunday, her sister Chloe sat in on the interview, and again, there were lots of things that Hollie came out with Chloe didn't know either. Things like, when she was in that, she received a text from Maslin which said, if you don't call me now, I'm going to come round there and put a baseball bat around your dad's head. He would never do that, of course, because he was a coward. But to a vulnerable young girl, he was powerful, and he had that power thought, and he used that power on that individual. Following the police interview on the Saturday evening, they said that they would put out a message to every police officer to say that he's wanted. We gave them a couple of addresses that Hollie knew about, his mum's, his nan's. They visited those addresses, but again, they couldn't locate him. I remember having a pizza with Hollie on that Monday evening, and how happy she was being with the family at home, enjoying herself again. And I think having said to him that it was over, even though he reacted in the way that he did, I think it was a real sense of relief that she'd finally managed to finish it with him. Hollie went to work on the Tuesday as she normally did. She went in late because she would be working late, and I texted her to say, hope you're okay. And she said, yeah, Dad, I'm fine, just had my nails done, just about to go into the salon. So we thought everything was okay. And that evening, we were going to have a meal round at Hollie's sister's, Chloe's house. So we were there, and then I had to go back to our house to pick something up that I'd left. So I went inside the house, and as I was about to leave, I saw two people park across our drive, which I thought was a bit strange. And then they started to come towards me, walk towards me, and I had a really horrible feeling in my stomach. And they said, "Are you Nick Gazard?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have a daughter called Hollie?" I said, "Yes." And at that stage, I don't know whether it's fatherly instinct, but I had this horrible feeling that something had happened to Hollie. And they said, "Can we come inside, please, sir?" So I brought them inside. He said, "Can you sit down?" So I sat down, and they had to tell me there and then that Hollie had been killed. And the bottom dropped out of my world. But all I could think about was, how the hell am I going to tell Hollie's mum and sister that she'd been killed? So the police said, "Right, okay, we need to go to the hospital quickly." I said, "Well, we need to go and tell my wife and Hollie's sister first." So they ferried me around to Chloe's house. I walked in the door, and Chloe was in the kitchen, Manny was in the front room. So I had to try and get Chloe out of the kitchen to tell them both at the same time. And my granddaughter was in there, and she looked at me and she said, "Grampy, what's wrong?" And I ignored her because I wanted to get Chloe out of the kitchen. So I got Chloe out, and then I had to tell Chloe that Hollie'd been killed. And that's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. They were absolutely stunned, and they said, "No, that's not happening, it's not happening. No, it's a dream, it's a nightmare, it's not happening." I said, "It has happened, and we've got to try and deal with it." The police then said that, we have to go to the hospital because that's where Hollie is. So, they took us to the hospital. We were in a family room. Hollie wasn't very far away, but they still considered it a bit of a crime scene, so we couldn't see her. We couldn't touch her or speak to her, as we would, even though she was dead. And in that room, we started to get texts through on our phones saying, "Is Hollie okay?" Because we've heard that there's been an incident in a salon in Southgate Street in Gloucester. And of course, that's where Hollie worked. So, we quickly had to start ringing around family and friends, telling them that Hollie's been killed, because the last thing that we wanted was them to hear that via social media or via the radio. And again, that was horrible to have to do that, to tell grandparents, to tell her uncles and her friends Hollie'd been killed. What we found out at that stage was that someone, and we knew it was Maslin, had walked into the salon where Hollie worked, had an altercation with Hollie, and then stabbed her multiple times in the chest, neck, and the heart. And even when the consultant came in to tell us what had happened and told us that she'd had multiple stabbings, the only thing of comfort that we heard was that after the first 1 or 2 stab wounds, she probably would not have known a lot about it. Even though she'd been stabbed, 14, 15, 16 times. She was she was dead after the first couple of stab wounds. So that was the only comfort that we took from that. Because Maslin was on the run, and they thought that he was the person that had done it because of the witnesses that were in the salon at that stage and knew him. Because of the threats to us previously, and to me, the police took that very seriously, and they had to move us to a safe house. So we had to go back to our house under police escort. And if you can imagine it, this is really surreal. We had a Range Rover of armed police in front, a Range Rover of armed police behind, and us in the middle. We picked up Hollie's dog, and they took us out of the village to a safe house. It's something you only get in the movies, but it was real life to us. And again, those images are firmly fixed in my mind. And that's the horrendous time that we had to go through, not knowing whether he was coming after us. But luckily, he was captured fairly early hours in the morning, and the police contacted us and said, that's what had happened, and we could actually breathe a little sigh of relief that he was not coming after us. What we found out later from the police investigations, that he took his DVD player into the local cash converters and exchanged that for £5. He went to the local Wilkinson store and he bought a kitchen knife. And they know from following him around Gloucester via CCTV that he'd been walking around for 2 or 3 hours before he knew that, around about 6 o'clock in the salon, it would be relatively empty, and that's when he could strike. So again, he went in at, I think it was about 10 to 6. There were a couple of people in there, one client Hollie was doing the hair on, and there were a number of apprentices in there who were younger than Hollie, 16, 17 years old, and that's when he struck, that's when he stabbed her to death. I think he killed Hollie because he couldn't have her. And as he was a narcissist and he loved himself, he knew he'd lost her from the incident on the Friday night when she told him it was over. So the ultimate power that he had was to take her life, and that's what he did. A little while after he'd murdered Hollie, he sent Chloe's partner a text message to say, "It did not have to happen this way, you made me do it." So what we get from that is that here we have a violent murderer who, even though he'd killed an innocent young individual who he said he loved, still had the power and still would not accept responsibility for what he did. He blamed it on someone else. The whole 3 to 4 days following Hollie's murder was a little bit of a blur. We know that we were taken to the place where Hollie was murdered, and we saw the flowers that the generous Gloucester public put down, but the whole 3 or 4 days was a little bit of a blur. But it took a long time to sink in, a long time for us to finally understand that Hollie'd gone. Someone had taken her life. She was 20 years of age, and we would never see her again. When we had Hollie back and we were able to arrange her funeral, we did arrange a funeral, something we shouldn't have to do as parents. You don't expect to have to bury your sons and daughters. We couldn't hold it at the local church because it was too small, and the police suggested that we held it at Gloucester Cathedral. By all accounts, there was around 900 to 1,000 people that attended the funeral, and we wanted it to be a little bit of a celebration of Hollie's life. And that's what happened. We invited individuals to wear bright colours because Hollie was that bright individual, and she would have hated people wearing black. During the police investigations, we found out that, this is not the first time that Maslin had abused a partner. We believe that he'd had 2 previous partners who he'd abused. They would not help the police with their inquiries because they were so fearful. We understand that he poured petrol through one of their doors. He was that type of individual. And we also know that he'd been arrested 23 times in the previous 6 years with increasing intensity. And when he murdered Hollie, he was out on bail for driving without a licence, driving whilst intoxicated, and for GBH. So here we have an individual who was on a collision course. He was at that end of the spectrum where someone was going to get it, and unfortunately, it was Hollie. We had to attend a number of court appearances in Bristol Crown Court, and Maslin attended as well, but he wouldn't admit his guilt at the initial hearings. He wanted to go down the route of diminished responsibility, but he had 2 psychiatric assessments, And both of them came back saying that there was nothing psychiatrically wrong with him. We imagine his briefs were telling him that, but he wouldn't take that on board, and I think he dismissed at least one set of briefs, maybe two, before on the third hearing he finally admitted his guilt. But that wasn't the end of his power and control. You know, he wanted to have the last word, so he appealed his sentence, and therefore we had to go to the Court of Appeal in London and hear the appeal. And I can always remember him being brought in with his armed guard and being in a cage at the top right of the courts, you know, their old-fashioned courts. And after half an hour, you know, the three High Court judges dismissed his appeal. And that was really the end of his power and control. People ask me, what would I say to him now? And my honest answer would be, why did you feel you had to do that? Why did you feel you had to take away a young person's life? Could you just not accept that that individual did not want to be with you anymore? Following Hollie's murder, after a couple of weeks when it started to sink in, you know, we went through such a traumatic time. I was thinking about how can we turn this into something positive? You know, how can we help prevent more Hollies happening? How can we prevent other parents going through what we go through and sisters going through what Chloe goes through on a daily basis? I didn't want Hollie just to be another statistic, so I decided on setting up a charity to help other people. What I would say to parents now is that if they detect any evidence of controlling relationship issues, then talk to a professional. You know, there are lots of professionals around, whether they're local or national. You can get the numbers on the internet, but talk to them because they can advise you what to do. They can give you that steer. And if we can educate parents and we can educate young people around relationships and what to do when relationships are not what they seem, then I think we will save a lot more people from going through what Hollie went through and parents going through what we go through on a daily basis. And we created the Hollie Gazzard Trust. My everlasting memory of Hollie is a bright, happy-go-lucky individual who was always smiling and gave enormous amounts of pleasure to other people.